Thanks for tuning in today to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us. Right now, many decisions are being made across the country about what to do with certain pieces of ground for next year. If you're coming out of CRP or pasture, we'll give you some ideas of the best way to get the most productivity next year.
We'll also talk about soybean traits, whether it's Extend or Liberty that farmers worked with this year or looking at Enlist next year. There are a lot of different things compared to just the old straight Roundup Ready trait. Well, we'll talk about all those things today and what your best options are for next year and weed control on your farm.
Speaking of weed control, we've got a perennial weed problem as our weed of the week today. But first, here's our farm basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about how farmers get grain bins ready for harvest. You see, on farms all across the country, there are these grain bins that farmers are going to store grain in for many months. So this is tremendously important because the farmer's money is all in his grain. And if that grain goes bad, well, the farmer has no money. So that's not a good thing. And this is why it's so incredibly important for farmers to make sure that all their bins are prepared prior to harvest.
Well, the first step in getting bins ready for harvest is to empty out last year's crop. Now, this sounds a little easier than it really is sometimes because you think, well, if that's the farmer's money, he should probably get that to town then and collect the money for his work from the last year. That is very true. But some farmers also have livestock and they want to hold on to that grain as long as they can to make sure they have a feed source for their livestock. So in those cases, they kind of want to make sure that crop is just about made before they're ready to give up any of that excess feed that they have.
The thing that I look at is you have to not just get rid of the grain and the big kernels, but you have to get rid of even the little scraps, even the little inert material, the fines, the dirt, everything else. We want that grain bin on the inside completely spotless. That way you have the least amount of risk for diseases and especially insects going into the next year's grain storage.
Well, the other thing that you want to have is you want to have the grain bin cleaned up around the outside. And you think, well, wait a second, isn't the grain in the bin? Yes, it is, but some can leak out around the outside. And also, you can have grass and weeds and so forth grow up around the outside of the bin. And that makes it very easy for rodents and other problems to be creeping right outside that bin. So you want to make sure that the area around the outside of the bin is clean too. You don't want any grain that's molding or grain that's spilled, and you certainly don't want to have rodents around.
The next step is making sure all the equipment is working properly. In most grain bins, there will be an auger on the bottom of the grain bin. You got to make sure that's fine because this is your one chance per year to take a look at that. Also, when you're standing inside the grain bin, we tell farmers just take a minute, look around. No daylight should be coming into that bin. Otherwise, you've got to get that bin sealed up better. The big enemy is water. If we have more moisture in the bin, then we have a much, much greater chance for grain spoilage.
Once everything is ready and all the equipment is good, the bin's cleaned out, it's time to spray some insecticide. Now what we're trying to do here is prevent any bugs from starting and kill any bugs that may still be hanging around after last year's grain disappeared. So you want to spray outside the bin like I talked about with rodents and so forth. You want to make sure the bugs are killed outside the bin so they don't come in, and then spray inside the bin as well.
So the product that we're typically using is malathion inside the bin. Outside the bin, we're using a cheap pyrethroid. So it's pretty inexpensive to do this. The big thing is you want to treat inside the bin and get out of there right away. We don't want to be breathing in those fumes. So spray inside the bin, get out of there, seal that bin up, and now you're all ready to go for this year's harvest.
Well, there are a few steps that are really important for farmers to take. Cleaning out last year's grain, killing all bugs, making sure everything is perfect so when the grain they harvest this year goes into those bins, it can be stored for many months. One thing out in fields farmers try to do to get ready for this year's crop is to control weeds like our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop this weed later in the show.
How will you secure your farm for the future? The Quasar Chopping Cornhead from Capello USA will help. Our design is focused on efficiency, longevity, and reducing harvest loss, making the Quasar the corn harvest solution to bring your farm forward. With hundreds of units ready for immediate delivery, secure your farm's future today. Do it for your farm. Do it for them. Order now. Capello USA. Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
So far, looking behind the machine, I'm thoroughly impressed with them. Compared to the older concaves we were running, we were finding about 40 grains, and we put these new ones in it, and it's hard to find one.
After the break, I found out about these concaves. While we were down, we put these concaves in, and it was like a different machine. I'd say we probably saved 3 to 5 bushels to the acre. I probably tripled my money just by putting these in.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
Ideal for herbicide applications, the ultra-low drifts large air-inducted droplets were designed to eliminate driftable fines without sacrificing coverage. Its thick three-dimensional pattern creates multiple angles for the spray to cover the target. Hypro, helping you spray better.
Invisible, invasive, underestimated. Nematodes are stealing over 10% of yields, and current protection methods aren't enough. But a new seed treatment technology controls nematodes before they attack. Introducing NemaStrike technology. It provides broad spectrum control from the start and stays in the root zone as plants grow. Take back your bushels with NemaStrike technology. Strike where nematodes attack.
Which soybean trait will you use on your farm next year? Well, Darren, all I know is there's no possible way I'm making any recommendation where it's straight Roundups anymore. No more Roundup 2s, and the reason why I say that is there are way too many Roundup resistant weeds. You need another option. So your choices are, should you go Liberty, should you go Extend, or what happens if Enlist gets labeled? I know there won't be a lot of seed, but should you go Enlist? Those are the 3 things we want to focus on today.
Well, even for the farmers who say, I have 0 weed problems, I still don't recommend going straight Roundup Ready soybeans, and the reason why is yield. When you look at the new traits that are coming out, they've been in the breeding process for a long time, and many of the companies have had product ready to come out for several years. We've got the newest genetics coming out of the market in Extend and other traits. Why would you plant old genetics that have been out for a long time? Now, if you look at yield data from this fall, it's going to be really interesting to see once again, just like we saw in 2016, as these new traits take another step up from where the straight Roundup beans were. So if all you're worried about is yield, plant the new traits.
All right, I'm going to assume that you may have heard from around the country, oh, there are all these drift issues and everything else with dicamba. No way. What we're seeing is absolutely not drift. I have been in fields all over the country, and here's what we're seeing. It's volatility. The product lands on the leaf, it vaporizes, and it moves. Okay, what we're usually seeing is this is happening because of temperature inversions. In order to avoid that, just spray during the middle of the day. You really shouldn't have any problem if you're talking a sunny day and it's the middle of the day, no problem. Finish your spraying 4 hours before sunset, and don't spray at least 2 or 3 hours until after sunrise. You should be in pretty good shape. The other big thing that I'll say, I saw a lot of reports late this summer, guys saying, well, we had delayed volatilization. No, you didn't have delayed volatilization. The volatilization happened within 24 hours of your spray, most likely. But you didn't see the symptoms for 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks, either because you weren't out there scouting every day, or mainly because there was such a low dose of dicamba that volatilized over into your beans. That's why we didn't see any problems show up for a long time. It was such a low rate. And a lot of guys have said, well, it didn't even hurt the weeds or anything else. Obviously, soybeans are the most sensitive plant there is. So if you have a tiny little bit of dicamba that gets on most plants, like a water hemp plant, it's not even going to phase it. But with soybeans, it'll cup the leaves a little bit. If it took 2 or 3 weeks before you saw any symptoms on beans, look, you aren't going to have yield loss. What you're probably going to have is yield gain. There's a 50-50 shot it could be yield loss or yield gain at that point. I'm not too worried about it. We very rarely see any soybean yield hurt unless the beans are shortened by dicamba. There was some of that this year. But certainly after learning from this year, I think a lot of guys are going to get a lot smarter. I'm really not too worried going into next year, as long as you avoid the early morning and the evening spraying.
That said, Brian, there's a huge market shift this year away from straight Roundup beans. Certainly many millions of acres went to Extend, but also there was a huge amount of growth in the Liberty Link acres. And when farmers plant Liberty Link, have no volatility issues, virtually no drift issues, it's pretty hard to argue against a guy that says, man, I got great weed control, I don't have the drift to deal with, I might just switch to Liberty Link. So here's a couple things to think about. When you're going Liberty Link, you can see a substantial improvement in control with Liberty if you use high gallons, high pressure, and small to medium-sized droplets. So you have to do all those things right and have good weather conditions. Liberty's going to work great. Where we saw a few issues this year was early in the spring where guys had cool temperatures. Also, where we had wet conditions and guys didn't get a pre-emerge herbicide out, Liberty over the top is great, but you have to start with a good pre or you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, in terms of yield, it's certainly there with the Liberty Link trait. You can look for some trials that are being done this year in your area once again, but you'll see the best Liberty Link beans yielding very similar to the best Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans.
In terms of Enlist, we really like the Enlist trait. The chemistry is amazing. We've used it on our own farm for 3 years in a row. Absolutely no problem with drift. Absolutely no problem with volatility. So we love it. Now, granted, it hasn't been out on a big scale, so it's hard to say how it will turn out when it gets on millions of acres. But the thought of having Enlist as another option is really good. Just keep in mind that dicamba will kill Enlist beans and 2,4-D will kill the dicamba beans. So you can't be rotating back and forth. The number one issue really we saw this year was tank clean out. You have to have great tank clean out. And it's the same kind of thing. You start thinking, oh, I can't use that trait. You plant corn and you spray for volunteer corn every year in your soybeans and you go back and forth at least at some point, right? Well, a volunteer corn killer, if you have even a trace of volunteer corn killer left in your spray tank, that's going to absolutely damage yield. Now, it won't cup the leaves on your corn plant, so you might not see it, but it's real easy to take 10 bushels off your corn, and it may have happened to you before. You might not have even noticed it. All I'm trying to say here is whenever you have products that are going to be sensitive to one crop or the other, you have to make sure you do an amazing job cleaning that spray tank out, and you can. It's not that difficult. Just take the time, get it done right.
Regardless of which of these traits you choose, there's a couple things that I would say are really givens now. If you've got winter annual weed problems, control them in the fall. You'll see much less mare's tail pressure if you get it under control in the fall in many areas of the country. So get out there with your fall treatments and then don't skip that pre-emerge treatment in the spring too. We're going to need multiple modes of action to do a good job on a broad variety of weeds.
All right, so whatever you pick for next year, our advice is absolutely do not pick straight Roundups. It's time to switch. Either go to Liberty or to Extend or Enlist, assuming that gets approved. Just don't stay with Roundups. There are way too many resistant weeds out there. You need another option for weed control and you want better yields. The last thing I guess I would say is don't get scared out of thinking, oh, I can't use Extend because everybody's having all these issues. No, we're not having all these issues. We really haven't hurt that many other acres. And once guys figure out how to avoid the temperature inversions and how to spray this stuff correctly, I think everything's going to be just fine.
Your choice of soybean traits may be impacted by our Weed of the Week if it's present in your fields. Can you identify this week's weed?
We love the quality, we love the construction. We're looking forward to working with Morton in the future.
They have this down to a science. They know exactly what you want. They know how to make it happen. It's an easy process.
I would definitely recommend Morton. From the first time I met the salesman to the last nail that the crew put in, it has been a positive and professional experience.
I'm so happy I found Morton because they just make the job so easy.
Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com. Invisible, invasive, underestimated. Nematodes are stealing over 10% of yields, and current protection methods aren't enough. But a new seed treatment technology controls nematodes before they attack. Introducing NemaStrike technology. It provides broad spectrum control from the start and stays in the root zone as plants grow. Take back your bushels with NemaStrike technology. Strike where nematodes attack.
And now we have Jenny in the field talking with Farmer Dave.
Dave, how is your season shaping up?
Well, I used the starting lineup that my AgroLiquid coach suggested in furrow, and the plants jumped right out of the ground. We had some wind damage here, but I called my AgroLiquid rep. He came out and suggested a foliar application of Ferterrain. It perked right up.
So you're feeling good about finishing out this season?
Absolutely. AgroLiquid is my championship team.
Thanks, Dave.
Hey, I'm Lisa Kelly. You might know me from history's Ice Road Truckers, but this summer, I'm looking for a change of scenery. We'll be visiting Love's travel stops in search of people who, like Dello, are game changers. I can't wait to meet as many of you as possible. Join me as I make my way across America with Chevron to get the word out about its game-changing heavy-duty diesel engine oil, Dello 400 with Isosin advanced technology. We'll see you out there on the road all summer long with Chevron, Dello, and Love's.
With wheat, greater access to N, P, and K means greater yield potential. Improve the availability of key nutrients for your winter wheat by putting Quick Roots microbial seed inoculant to work in your fields. Containing 2 powerful microbes, Quick Roots technology promotes early season vigor, improved stalk strength, and ultimately maximum yield potential for your wheat. Learn how you can put the power of nature to work at monsantobioag.com/quickroots.
What should you do if you want to take ground out of CRP or out of pasture and put it to a crop? Well, today we'll talk about just that, because over the last couple of years on our own farm, we've done that with CRP and with pasture.
First of all, I'll start with weed control. When you think about it, if you're coming out of something that's perennial, like we've got perennial grasses and other potentially broadleaves out there, how are you going to get those under control? When you think about our cropping systems, we do a good job stopping annual weeds, but perennials can be a little more difficult. Oftentimes we can use a Roundup treatment at a very high rate, up towards the high end of the labeled rate, and do a good job on these perennials that are out in pastures. We could also utilize something like extend crops, so we had dicamba in the mix, which can also move down into the root system of things like thistles.
Darren mentioned perennial weeds. The first thing I always think about with perennials taking ground out of CRP or pasture is you got to use Roundup. I know that Roundup doesn't kill a lot of weeds out there, but it still is really good on many perennials, as opposed to Liberty or Gramoxone. I mean, there are a lot of contact killers that don't get that entire root system. So I think that's really important. The biggest thing that I look at when I think about CRP and pasture ground is, for many years, the organic matter in that soil has been building up. There have been a lot of great things in terms of soil health done, and ideally, I don't want to have to do full-scale tillage. I'd like to go out with strip till or no-till, something like that. I get it that maybe there's some gopher holes or, just things like that where you have to smooth the ground out a little bit, but try not to do major tillage, moldboard plowing, anything like that, because you just destroy so much of what you've built up for the last many years.
The other thing that may have built up over the years is certain herbicides that have carryover potential. I think about products like Tordon, for example, that while the weed killing power wears out over a year or two, the danger that it causes to crops like soybeans, for example, could persist in the soil for many more years, maybe 5 years or even more since the last Tordon application. Well, that could impact a soybean crop. So generally, I want to find out what has been used in that pasture or CRP over the last 10 years. And then if I see some things that scare me, I'm probably going to go with a grass crop like corn to try to avoid injury.
Yep, so on ground where we've had it been pasture in the past, take it out of pasture. We'll leave it in corn for 10 years most of the time, because Darren, I think, is underselling Tordon and its residual. Very often we'll see Tordon carry over for 10 years. So you want to make sure that you have a grass crop, corn or wheat, for a really, really long time out of pasture or CRP if one of those long residual herbicides has been used. Other than that, I guess the big thing that I would say here is you can be successful with CRP or pasture ground. We've had it where first year out, we're 250 bushel corn. It can work. but you've got to look at what's your fertility. Do a good job of soil sampling, properly fertilize, invest the money, and think long term, not just, oh, I gotta get by this year, get by cheap. Most of the time, we're only talking a few acres that you pull out. Invest the money heavily to build that soil up and make it good for the long term.
One final word of caution would be about insects. If you've got some ground that hasn't been tilled for many years, like pasture or CRP, and you're probably not going to do heavy tillage right now, like Brian was recommending, you've got a lot of insects out there. You may have a lot of grubs, you may have a lot of wireworms, depending on your area of the country.
Yeah, it's not going to be the rootworms or bean leaf beetles or anything like that, but it is those grubs and some of the tougher insects.
Well, and you see moths and that kind of thing like to use heavy grass like that as a good place to lay eggs. So do be on alert for bugs, and you're going into a new field here. Scout it regularly. You may say, I don't have time to get to every one of my fields every week. Make sure you're in this field every week or you will have some issues.
Yeah, because it can be super successful when you take CRP or pasture out and put it to a crop.
One thing you may have to watch out for is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Weed of the week is Virginia ground cherry.
When I first saw Virginia ground cherry, it was about the time Eastern black nightshade came onto our farm, and Dad said, watch out for Eastern black nightshade, and he kind of described it to me. And then I saw Virginia ground cherry thinking it was Eastern black nightshade, and I got all excited. Oh man, we've got this problem weed on a certain field, and Dad's like, wait a second, you're looking at ground cherry. That's not a big deal to me.
Well, yeah, but Virginia ground cherry is a perennial weed. Black nightshade is only an annual weed, so it does take different control methods, and back then we didn't really have Roundup Ready crops or anything, so what are you going to do? Well, we had good success going out spraying straight Roundup just in those spots. Back with the old bean rider, that seemed to work out pretty well, and I'd tell you the same thing today. Roundup actually is very good on this particular weed, but just understand, any perennial, you can't go with the normal 22-ounce rate or even a quart. It's probably going to take the highest labeled rate of Roundup, then you'll have success.
It wasn't a super invasive weed, fortunately. If you do see some out in your fields, the pre's aren't highly effective on it, other than we like sharpen in a burn down, or if you've got Roundup in the burn down, you'll do fine.
Yep, but again, if you're going to burn down, you're probably just going to kill the top growth and not the roots. This is a perennial weed, so that's where we really do prefer Roundup. But yes, you can suppress it with Husky in wheat. You can suppress it with dicamba or status in corn. Certainly Liberty, and even maybe the 2,4-D or dicamba that you may be able to use depending on the trait in soybeans. It'll knock it down, but Roundup is going to be the best.
That's all the time we have for our Weed of the Week, Virginia ground cherry, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
With the success of the Case IH Steiger Quad Track and Magnum Road Track tractors, it's no secret why Case IH is the leader of the track. So it wasn't surprising when the competition started imitating us. But only Case IH offers a 5-axle design to give you a smoother ride, more power to the ground, with less berming and compaction. Still, we're flattered. In fact, if we weren't already red, we'd be blushing.
And now we have Jenny in the field talking with Farmer Dave.
Dave, your orchard looks amazing. How is your season shaping up?
Well, I'm using the starting lineup that my AgroLiquid coach suggested through my irrigation system. The trees have gained measurable girth. Everything's looking really good. I'm on track to get my fruit to the market a full week ahead of my neighbors.
So you're feeling good about finishing up this season?
Absolutely. AgroLiquid is my championship team.
Nodulation. It's essential for nitrogen fixation in soybeans, but how can you help it happen in your fields? Monsanto BioAg offers inoculants that answer that question. Microbial seed applied solutions that work to establish high populations of rhizobia in your fields, helping with optimum nodulation and increased performance in your soybeans. Learn how inoculants powered by nature can help you at monsantobioag.com/inoculate.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
When seeding cover crops, how do you get a blend of seed to spread evenly across a field, and is it even that important? We'll discuss this topic in today's Iron Talk. When we seed a cover crop, we use a blend. We put it in with a drill, and we hope for the best. To be fair, we aren't doing a huge amount of acres. Plus, since we aren't harvesting a cover crop, we aren't super worried about having an ideal mix across the field. Now, here are the drawbacks of doing things the way that we do. First, you planted a blend for a reason, and the benefits aren't equally distributed in the field. Second, uneven growth this year could lead to uneven growth of your crop next year. Third, uneven growth leads to uneven residue distribution. However, the benefit of doing it how we do is that it's inexpensive and easy to do. The guys who are doing big acres of cover crops and seeing the best responses are often using air carts and air drills to seed the crop the right way. With 3-compartment carts, for example, they can get a very accurate spread of 3 different cover crops with dramatically different seed sizes. Plus, seeding deep enough to get good moisture around the seed is a big deal. Since we're in the heat of the summer right now, there aren't the concerns about deep planting like in the cold early spring. The seed should emerge pretty quickly with heat and moisture. If you have the equipment to accomplish all this, there's no question it's the ideal way to seed a cover crop. If not, and you're only doing a few acres, you can either seed each crop in the blend separately or just accept a less than perfect spread, seeding a blend at one time. We've chosen the latter route for several years now on our farm, and it's worked out just fine. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
That's our time for today. We want to thank you for joining us. Over the course of this next week, we'd love to have you tune in to the Ag PhD radio show as well. You'll find us on SiriusXM channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We've got another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
There are as many living things in a handful of soil as there are people on planet Earth. But what do they do, and how do farmers work with them to raise successful crops? Beneficial bacteria, fungi, and other microbial creatures are being used in the production of nearly every crop. To learn more, visit rnmf.org.